Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. He humiliated and slapped her, without knowing she was the owner. In an upscale Chicago neighborhood, where wide avenues were lined with century-old maple trees whose leaves danced gently in the light autumn breeze, stood the Evergreen, a renowned restaurant recognizable by the muffled clink of silver cutlery and the soft lighting filtering through its large bay windows. The building, a tastefully restored red brick building, exuded an atmosphere both warm and sophisticated. Here, every detail counted, from the choice of crisp white linen tablecloths to the carefully updated floral arrangements each week, to the impeccably uniformed staff, who were not overly smiling. Over the years, the place had become a veritable local institution, a haven for lovers of fine dining and regulars seeking an elegant retreat away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Reservations were often made several weeks in advance, and the clientele, often senior executives, artists, and the occasional political figure, swore by the excellent service. On that day, however, the elegance and serenity that reigned in the restaurant were going to be put to the test. At the center of this scene, Vanessa Harper walked with measured steps. A woman in her 50s with a haughty bearing, she embodied a form of timeless elegance. Her black hair, carefully pulled back into a low bun, revealed a few silvery strands, testifying to a life rich in experiences. Her perfectly tailored navy suit hugged her figure effortlessly, reflecting sure taste and discipline acquired over the years. There was no pretense on her face, just a calm, almost serious expression that naturally commanded respect. But what the clients and staff didn't know was that Vanessa Harper was no ordinary client. Behind her plain exterior and understated demeanor, she hid a formidable businesswoman, an empire builder who had earned her independence through hard work and determination. Owner of the building housing, the Evergreen, she also owned several other properties throughout Chicago, ranging from art galleries to boutique hotels. Her name circulated in business circles, evoked with admiration but also sometimes with apprehension, as she knew how to make herself heard and impose her vision. That day, Vanessa had decided to go to the restaurant incognito. She had chosen a simple outfit, far removed from the evening gowns or extravagantly tailored suits she wore to public events. She wanted to observe, without filter, the daily reality of her establishment. Her objective was clear: to discreetly assess the quality of service, the mutual respect between staff and customers, and to ensure that the values she had always advocated, respect, dignity, excellence, were not just empty words displayed in internal charters, but were actually lived on a daily basis. For Vanessa, the success of a place wasn't measured solely by its revenue or awards, but above all by how each person, from the server to the manager, treated others. Because behind every refined plate, behind every polite smile, there was a story, a life, a human dignity to be preserved. Vanessa had barely crossed the threshold of the Evergreen when her gaze swept the room with quiet attention, assessing every detail, the synchronization of the servers, the way customers were greeted, the general attitude of the staff. She expected everything to be impeccable, as she had always demanded. But before she could even take a few steps, a figure stepped in front of her, firm and rigid. It was Mark Reynolds, the deputy director. A white man in his 30s, with pale skin and a stone-hard gaze. His suit, too stark black for this elegant but casual setting, seemed more like armor than clothing. He held a rigid posture, his shoulders pulled back, his chin slightly raised, as if to crush any opposition. Mark looked her over slowly, from head to toe, his cold gaze full of contempt. There was in the way he looked at her the arrogant conviction that her word was law here. "Madam, this is not a place to wander around without a reservation," he said in a low, hard, almost mechanical voice. "If you are not a customer, please leave." Vanessa, without losing her calm, replied in a calm, firm but courteous tone. "I'm here for a quick visit, to make sure everything is in order." Mark shrugged, visibly annoyed, as if his patience had already reached its limits. "Listen, this isn't your seat. If you haven't booked, I advise you to leave before I notify security." There was a veiled threat in her voice, a usurped authority. But Vanessa didn't waver. Her silence, heavy and calm, seemed to heighten the tension. Suddenly, amid the quiet commotion of the restaurant, a clumsy young waiter took a sideways step and spilled a glass of red wine onto the tablecloth near Vanessa. The scarlet liquid dripped slowly, threatening to stain the polished parquet floor. Instinctively, Vanessa took a step back to avoid the projection. But Mark, his eyes blazing with sudden anger, interpreted this movement as a gesture of insolence or defiance. Without warning, in a fit of disproportionate rage, he raised his hand and slapped Vanessa violently on the cheek. "Don't think you can come here and lay down the law," he yelled, his voice cracking with fury. An icy silence immediately fell over the room. The clatter of forks stopped, conversations froze. Several shocked customers took out their phones and began filming the scene, the screen's lights furtively illuminating their horrified faces. Vanessa gently placed her hand on her bruised cheek, feeling the warmth of the skin irritated by the slap. Yet in her eyes, there was neither anger nor fear, only quiet determination. She inhaled slowly, as if to summon all her inner strength. Wordlessly, she removed her cell phone from her pocket, her fingers sliding confidently across the touchscreen. She dialed a number she knew by heart, a number that, on its own, could change the course of the situation. A few minutes later, the restaurant doors opened again, admitting a man in his 50s with a serious face and graying hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He walked with a confident gait, accompanied by two security guards whose presence immediately commanded respect and calm. The tense atmosphere dissipated almost instantly under their calm authority. The man approached Vanessa and placed a caring hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Harper, are you all right?" he asked with palpable respect in his voice. Mark, who had until now displayed a fierce arrogance, suddenly paled, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Mrs. Harper, the owner," he stammered, his voice betraying his fear. Vanessa didn't look away. Her dark eyes met Mark's with a cold sharpness, tinged with deep disappointment. "Yes, Mark. And you just failed badly." The murmur of customers, the whispers, and the buzzing of cell phones that continued to film amplified the scene. The slap, beyond its physical violence, had become a symbol of moral and professional failure. Quickly, the videos posted on social media spread like wildfire. In less than 24 hours, the hashtag #JusticeForVanessa went viral, shared by thousands of internet users, sparking a wave of outrage and solidarity. Local and then national media took up the story, sending reporters and television crews to cover what they were already calling a scandal of disrespect. Facing the cameras, Vanessa spoke with the same dignity that had characterized her throughout the incident. "What I experienced that day is proof that there is still much to be done to combat prejudice. But this slap, as humiliating as it may be, will not erase years of struggle and success. I stand here not for myself, but for all those who suffer silent injustice every day." Under media and public pressure, Mark was immediately suspended and then fired a few days later. His reputation was permanently tarnished, and he quickly disappeared from the professional circles that had previously supported him. This scene was a turning point, a symbolic victory in Vanessa's fight for a more just and respectful world. A few weeks after the incident, Vanessa Harper sat in the center of a bright conference room, facing a group of journalists, representatives of local organizations, activists, as well as members of her staff and the Evergreen's loyal customers. The setting was simple but symbolic, a large restaurant logo emblazoned with the words, "Respect, Diversity, Excellence," loomed behind her. In a clear and confident tone, Vanessa announced the implementation of an ambitious and innovative program within her establishment. This plan was structured around a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination, racial, sexual, social, or otherwise, which she described as a corrosive poison for team cohesion and the quality of service. She unveiled mandatory and regular training for all staff, focusing on raising awareness of cultural diversity, mutual respect, combating unconscious bias, and managing conflict with empathy and professionalism. At the same time, she announced the creation of a diversity and inclusion committee, tasked with ensuring these values are respected, listening to grievances, and proposing continuous improvements. Enthusiasm and emotion were evident on everyone's faces. Several employees, who had long endured discriminatory attitudes in silence, stood up to applaud. The media repeatedly echoed his powerful words, transforming the program into an inspiring example for other institutions. With this new lease of life, the Evergreen saw its clientele evolve. Residents of Chicago, and even beyond, began to frequent the restaurant more often, appreciating not only the quality of the food, but also the warmer and more respectful atmosphere that now reigned there. Food critics unanimously highlighted this renewal, which combined refinement and humanity. Within the team, a new pride was born. The servers, chefs, and managers rediscovered the deep meaning of their profession, driven by a strong, committed, and deeply compassionate leader. Vanessa embodied this change through her example, her attentiveness, and her ability to transform pain into a driving force for progress. Back in her office at the top of the building, Vanessa watched the city come to life through the large bay window. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkled like urban stars, while below, the streets began to fill with life. The red mark on his cheek from the slap seemed to almost melt into his skin, a lingering but now less painful memory. His gaze, however, shone with an indomitable flame, that of unwavering determination. She now knew that dignity and respect cannot be bought, imposed by force or title, but are earned every day through just and courageous actions. And Vanessa Harper was ready to do anything to ensure that no one would ever again be humiliated because of their appearance, their color, or their origin. Because true greatness, for her, lay in the ability to lift others up without ever crushing them.